Do you ever wake up feeling a little bit all over the place? Maybe it was a rocky morning, you're still in your bum clothes, and one task you're late on is making you feel panicked, paranoid, and rejected. Some of you will laugh at the fact that I said just one task and feel like your whole life is behind. And others of you are just bearing this burden of wanting to be a good steward of the things that the Lord has blessed you with and that other people have entrusted to you. And you want to respond to your emails in a timely manner, stay caught up on your laundry, but instead you feel squirmy and guilty and even anxious. Today we're diving into why these feelings don't mean that you're failing. They're actually pointing towards a deeper need for identity in Christ and nervous system regulation. So in this episode, you'll learn how to stop the negative thought loops so you can finally experience the peace and the contentment that you've been praying for. And this is also going to be a super fun episode because this is based off of a client coaching call. So I'm going to be bringing some of the things that she said and some of the things I responded to her into this episode and kind of sharing with you what that looks like so that you can see yourself in her story and her struggles and the advice that I gave her.
Do you want to heal your relationship with yourself and grow closer to God, but anxiety, perfectionism, and trust issues make connection feel hard and unsafe? If you said yes, you're in the right place. Hey, I'm Micaiah Gray, a Christian woman, wife, and mom. After years of struggling, I learned the secret to healing from my past so I could finally feel secure, loved, and confident. If you're ready to see yourself the way God does, fully trust in the Lord with all your heart, and finally connect deeply with others, then grab your journal, tea, and a pen because I'm about to speak so much life into you, friend. Okay, so today I'm taking you through a conversation I recently had with a client because I think many of you are going to relate to this. And if you're listening to this and you find yourself nodding along, then I highly, highly encourage you to stop doing this all alone. Reach out and book a coaching call with me if this episode is speaking to you, especially if, like my client, you've been in different forms of talk therapy, you've tried different strategies on your own, or maybe in, other forms like therapy, church, etc. But you just find that the things that you tried, maybe they worked for a little bit, but they didn't stick. And you're tired of feeling like easily overwhelmed and emotionally dysregulated, feeling like you can't control your emotions and your thoughts. I want to invite you to book an emotional healing coaching call with me. You don't need another Band-Aid. You need this Christ-centered framework that's rooted in scripture and science to help you achieve mindset shifts that stick and last. So don't let fear inhibit your professionalism or your personal relationships. I want to help you overcome these mental, emotional, and nervous system hurdles so that your relationship with yourself will be strong, your relationship with God will be strong, and your relationship with others will be strong. Oops. Sorry about that. At least you know I'm human. All right. So if that sounds like you and you are like, yes, Micaiah, I want to book a coaching call with you. I don't want to do this alone anymore. Then head to coaching.micaiahgray.com, or you can type in your search bar MICAIHGRAY.com and click on the coaching tab at the top of the screen. You can also head to the show notes below and click the link there to book your call today. Okay, so I just want to kind of start by giving you some context to what my client was saying to me and what she was struggling with so you can kind of understand the advice that's going to come later in the episode. So she was essentially telling me a couple different things, and I was like, okay, let's narrow it down to one focus so that we can really go all in on that thing. And so we picked a work-related task. It was something that she had been, I guess you could say, kind of procrastinating. It just hadn't been done. And she was starting to feel very worried, anxious, guilty about it. And there was a lot of emotions coming up, but there was also a lot of fear-driven thoughts that were kind of showing up. Her worrying about like someone being mad at her about the timeline of it and etc. And it wasn't something that actually had a set deadline, but in her own mind, her own expectations of how long it should have took, it was way past due. Her own standard, her own expectation, not necessarily a set deadline with another person. So we're talking through this, and
she was kind of explaining to me, there were some things she had kind of said about herself and some things related to the specific situation. And so she was telling me that this was bringing up shame, guilt, fear. And we were talking about some of the physiological symptoms like shakiness, heat, etc. Like when your body just starts getting really hot, you start having racing heart, racing thoughts, physical discomfort, that sort of thing. So we got into the nitty gritty of all those details. And she was sharing with me that, earlier in the call, before we started talking about this, actually, she had shared with me that she can be super chatty too. And we were kind of relating on that, how like, oh, we could just talk forever. So we need to make sure we're really focused on this topic and not like wander off so that we could make the best use of our time. But then later in, our coaching call, she was talking about this mental struggle with this situation at work. And, we had talked over some specific emotion words, and she had brought up like feeling awkward, discouraged, self-conscious. And so she's battling these inner struggles, but on the outside, she's still like super chatty, and I was thinking about that. I didn't connect the dots till afterwards because it was two different parts of the conversation, but I can relate to that for myself. And I know so many of you can relate to that. It's like that feeling of, I am so like when I get to chatting with someone about something, especially when it's a comfortable setting, you're comfortable with that person, you relate on some sort of thing, you've built like rapport, trust, and maybe it's something you're super passionate about, you can just start talking on and on and on, right? And I don't even consider myself to be extroverted. I lean more towards the introverted side, but I would say I'm closer to the middle. It kind of depends. And so I just know that I will get like that though, even though I'm more introverted. When I am with someone in a conversation is like moving, it's like I get scatterbrained. I get so excited. I'm just talking about all these things, right? And yet on the inside, we can just struggle with who we are, with feeling awkward, with second guessing ourselves, with self-doubt, with being hard on ourselves, with being a perfectionist, with procrastinating, with shame, so many things, right? Yeah, on the outside, to other people, it might look like we have it together, or like we're just super, more outgoing than we really are, or, that we're more put together than we really are. And sometimes we can get so focused on trying to kind of like demonstrate to other people that we are this put together professional person, like we have our stuff together, we're emotionally regulated, like the perfectionist in us wants other people to see us that way because there's this fear of failure. There's this fear of rejection. There's this fear of abandonment, of people seeing who we are, including our flaws, and abandoning us, or, jumping ship. We have that fear that we're going to end up alone and rejected. And that is super normal because that is our survival instinct. Is, if you think historically, it wouldn't have been safe to be alone. People lived in groups and they lived in cities for a reason, because if they were out in the wilderness by themselves, they're more likely to not make it, to either be attacked by another human or an animal, right? And so there's this bodily need to be around people and be accepted by them. And that is because we were wired that way for safety. But in this culture, in this day and age, we don't necessarily need that survival instinct to, fit in. And yes, it helps to fit in still to this day. But when one person rejects you, it's not like you're getting kicked out of all of society, And so we kind of talked through that a little bit. And really the main theme of it was that it went back to what she had told me before our session, where she was telling me that she felt like she had to try to earn her worth through being perfect so that she could keep the peace, because she didn't ever want anyone to be mad at her. She had these people-pleasing tendencies kind of tied into that fear of rejection. And it all kind of stemmed back to the belief that she didn't think she was enough. And we talked about this in the workshop we did a couple weeks ago. If you were there, you watched the replay, we talked about, these three main lies of feeling like you're not enough, you need to earn your worth, or sometimes it comes out as I'm too much. What was the other one? I'm totally blanking on the other one. It's okay though. Anyways, it all kind of goes back to these main beliefs that we formed at a very young age, that we made sense of, our world with our little baby or child brain, based on the way that people treated us or talked to us, the shows we watched, everything we took in before we even knew we were taking it in started to shape our thoughts and our beliefs. And we ended up with some of these ideas about ourselves that are not necessarily biblical, that did not come from God. And so as I reflected on my session with her, there was kind of three main things I wanted to bring up to you that I think you can all apply. The first thing was, there's this the squirmy body. I don't really know if squirmy is the right word, but that's just one of the many words that, I think she used to explain these physical symptoms that were going on in her body. And so there's the physical symptoms and the nervous system. And I want you to learn to recognize these things as well. This is one of the main things I do with clients in the beginning, is we talk about just recognizing what's actually going on inside of you. Because that was a big part of where I started on my healing journey, is just learning to recognize what was happening inside my body and my mind, because because of all the trauma and the hard things and the painful relationships and the brokenness that I walked through, I had kind of developed this strategy unintentionally, right? It wasn't like I sat down and wrote the plan out, but my body developed the strategy to protect me of just kind of blocking things out. And so in some ways I became numb, in other ways I became overreactive, over hypersensitive to things. And I kind of had both. And both of them are normal responses to trauma in the body and the nervous system. And so I wouldn't always be able to tell what my symptoms were, what was happening, because I wasn't tuned into my body. I had learned to just kind of shut it off because it was too painful to be in tune with all that was going on when my body was literally holding and storing that trauma, and it was affecting me day to day. And so when we start recognizing those physical red flags, like a racing heart, sweating, heat, tension, or physical health discomforts, even sometimes this can tie into our physical health. Sometimes it's directly related to our physical health. I've been learning a lot more about how emotional health is directly tied to physical health. But either way, if your body is stuck in a nervous system response that is based in this fight or flight, they call it sympathetic nervous system, when you're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn state. If that's where you're at, then it views every little thing like a late task at work as a threat to your safety and worth. And it's going to start making you feel like you're on this life or death situation. And that's why you start to have all these symptoms, like your heart starts racing, you're sweating, etc. Because your body literally thinks oh my gosh, there's a wild animal chasing us, even if you're not not the physical need to run. Sometimes there is, though. Sometimes there is a physical need to move your body when you get into this state. But sometimes it's your body thinks, oh my gosh, we're life or death here. Panic, go into survival mode, shut down every system we don't need. And this is also why it's hard for you to think clearly when you're in this state, because your body is not going to allow you to sit there and contemplate something thoroughly when you're in a life or death situation. It's no, we only need the systems that we absolutely need to escape or to, fight our way out of this or get through this, right? And so clear thinking is one of the first things that your body is just going to shut down, as well as your reproductive system. That's why a lot of women who've gone through trauma and hard things, they struggle with their reproductive health, with their cycles, with their hormones, because if your body has been in a chronic state of fight or flight, a chronic state of sympathetic nervous system, you have chronically high cortisol, which is your stress hormone, then your body, it just learned, oh, we don't have the energy, we don't have the safety to turn all these things on because we're in life or death situation 99% of the time. And so it's almost like your body can to become addicted to it. And I think that's a whole nother conversation we'll have for another day, but it just becomes normal. It becomes what you're used to. And then actually starting to feel safe or slow down starts to feel unsafe because now you're not used to feeling safe. And again, that's a whole nother conversation. I didn't even mean to go there. That was not my notes. But anyway, so how do we start healing this? One of my favorite things that I was telling her is obviously breathing is such a good foundation to be practicing. And I used to look down on it because I was like, oh, duh, I've done that. I've worked on that. I already know. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So revolutionary, right? But then I started to realize I wasn't actually implementing it in the moment. And I was kind of like ignoring it because I thought it was too basic to be my solution. So I just want to encourage you to try more breathing exercises. Find one that works for you. My favorite is the physiological sigh, and we're going to do it right now together. I want you to practice with me. We're going to take a long breath in to fill the lungs as full as you can, and then you're going to take an extra sniff, like literally that just little inch of breath that you can get in at the top, and then a slow breath out. Okay, let's do it. This one is my favorite, especially pairing that with like putting my hand on my chest, because it provides such a quick relief, such quick stress release, and it signals to the brain that you're safe. Essentially, if you think like anything that you would do, if anything you wouldn't do while you're in a survival situation. So like if an animal's chasing you, you're probably not going to stop and take a deep breath, right? And so when we do things that we wouldn't do in a survival state, when our body thinks we're in a survival state, then it starts to help the body realize, oh, we're not in a life or death situation. We can calm down. It's okay. And this is one of those things. And as well as just compassionate self-touch, whether that's a hand on the heart, a hand on your arm, rubbing your shoulders, etc. Some people do tapping, like tapping themselves lightly. And so this is starting to get your brain and your body to realize that it's okay to relax, and then you start to calm down. You can switch into parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and digest state, and then you're able to think clearly. Okay, the second thing was that I want to talk about, she had mentioned stewardship, which I thought was beautiful. It was like her heart was that she really, really wanted to be a good steward of these things. And that's why it bothered her that she was late on something. And it was this seemingly good desire that, like, surface level, of course, stewardship is a good thing. Like, we all want to be good stewards. That's biblical. It's a good desire. But behind it, there was this perfectionism of her kind of beating herself up, and that leading to procrastination, and her feeling like she was failing, that she was falling short, that she would be judged, that maybe someone would be angry at her and she wouldn't know what to say, right? There was this shame that came with it. It felt heavy. And that's because this good desire was a value of hers. Like, she has this value of being a good steward, and because of the standards and expectations she set for herself, she wasn't living up to her own value system. And we all have a value system, whether or not we've sat down and like really figured out what it is. We do all have values, and when we're living out of alignment with those values, we start to feel really icky. And that's when shame and guilt can start to creep in. And the solution to this, in my opinion, is not changing your values so that, they're more lackadaisical and they just fit, whatever you feel like that day. I don't think that that's a good solution, although some people definitely do that to ease the discomfort of their guilt. I also don't think the solution is to just focus on behavior modification and force yourself and try harder to hit all your values perfectly all the time, right? Like, that's just more of the perfectionism. That's just more of trying to make yourself, and I say this with so much love, but it's almost like we're trying to make ourselves into the God of our lives when we are striving in perfectionism. And I'm talking to myself here too, so hopefully you don't feel too judged by this, but we are incapable of being perfect because God is the only perfect one. Jesus was the only perfect human. And that's because he wasn't just human. He was human and God, fully human, fully God. And so we are incapable of it. And therefore, self-compassion, in my opinion, is the only way to go. We can still have our values and want to hit them and be working on that behavior side of things so that we can hit those values more often, hit those goals more often, while also offering ourselves compassion because we are only human. So I want you to just work on figuring out how you're struggling in perfectionism, and seeing where maybe you feel like you've been falling short, where you've been feeling like a failure. And I want you to reframe it so that you're not putting how good enough you are, how much you're worth in this task, or how well you do these things, but instead you're thinking to yourself, I am only human. I'm going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And I'll just do a little bit better next time, right? So don't panic, but come from a place of peace, because fear is not from the Lord. Okay. And then the last point here to wrap up is that I want you to become the watcher of your thoughts. Learn to observe negative self-talk and intrusive thoughts without becoming them, without making them a part of who you are, or making them mean something about you, or attaching really strong emotions to them. They're just thought options floating through your mind. You don't have to choose them. So every thought you have is not true, and engaging with every what if will lead to exhaustion. I didn't pull up how many thoughts a day we have. You can Google it, but I know it's a really high number. And yeah, just to say that would be very exhausting to try to argue with every single one. So we already naturally have thoughts that we're letting go of just be out of necessity. But then there's those other thoughts that feel hard to shake. And there's really no difference except that you're attaching more emotional meaning to those thoughts. So how you can start with this is just treat your thoughts kind of like that annoying person you want to leave you alone. I hate to frame it that way because it's not very nice, but it's the best example I can think of right now. It's like that annoying kid, that annoying kid or person or whoever, you want them to stop talking to you, but you're too nice to tell them that. And you're feeling frustrated. Maybe it's really not a good time for them. They keep interrupting you in the middle of something, or whatever it is. Maybe they're pushing boundaries that you tried to set with them. And you keep trying to make it very, very clear to them that you're not interested in the conversation by being as interesting as you can possibly be. Like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, really? Like half listening, half responding. We kind of want to apply that same logic to our thinking. Like if you have a thought that's popping up that is not necessarily a thought you want, it's just like, oh, that's interesting, but I think I'm not going to choose that one. Like it's very unemotional. It's very like dismissive. And it's not that we're trying to like shame ourselves or guilt ourselves or beat that thought down. Like that's just more ineffective. That just makes the thought feel worse, feel stronger. So to kind of wrap up everything we're talking about here, anxiety and perfectionism are not signs of failure. They are signs that your inner critic is being loud and your nervous system is tired, and you can be a good steward without being panicked or without feeling out of control of yourself or feeling like your behaviors, your thoughts, your emotions are not aligning with your value system. I want you to remember that you are not these negative thought loops that you've been getting trapped in. You are a child of God, and His grace is sufficient. Even on the days where you feel all over the place, scattered, it's okay. God's got you. You are only human.
Hey friend, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can find the healing they need? Also, please come join us in the Facebook group where we support and we pray for each other regularly. It lights me up to know that this podcast is helping you. Alright, I'm off to go hide in my closet with a journal and my Bible. I'll meet you back in a few days for another episode. See you then.